Now that the 2025 NFL Draft has come and gone, what moves can the Steelers make in the free agency and trade markets to still make this team better before the start of the 2025 NFL season? Welcome into Steelers Talk. I am your host, Jack Sperry. We're going to talk about some Steelers free agency and trade targets after the 2025 NFL Draft on today's show. But before we get into the content today, get us started down there in the comments section by grading the job that Steelers GM Omar Khan has had to this point in the offseason. Give me an A, a B, a C, a D, or enough to kick us off. So I think that the positions that the Steelers could definitely still address after the NFL Draft, and don't get me wrong, I think the Steelers have done a darn good job at this point addressing the needs that they had heading into the offseason in both free agency and in the draft. But they still need a starting quarterback. I'm sorry, Mason Rudolph and Will Howard fans. They still need a starting quarterback. They still need a starting nickel cornerback. They do have some options on the roster, but hey, if they can get a bona fide starting nickel corner, I don't think that they would scoff at that. And then the final thing is that they could use some more depth along the offensive line. So before we start talking specifics about these positions and the players that are still available, I want to let you guys know how much cap space the Pittsburgh Steelers still have at their disposal, which is just over $28.1 million. All right, so that's still a lot. That is still top 10. Bordering on top 5 in the National Football League right now. And more than likely, a good portion of that is going to be used for Aaron Rodgers. All right, Rodgers has obviously been heavily linked to the Steelers all offseason long, and the Steelers obviously still feel like he will sign with the team, even going so far as to not take a quarterback early on in the 2025 NFL Draft. They are that confident that he is going to sign with them. And the expected contract, Rodgers said himself on the Pat McAfee show a couple of weeks ago that he'd play for $10 million. 1 year, $10 million is expected to be what the contract is going to be for Aaron Rodgers. So if that's the case, you got about $18 million, a little bit more change there to use on free agents via trade or whatever to fill out the rest of the roster. And if Rodgers doesn't sign with the Pittsburgh Steelers and decides to retire, which seems unlikely at this point, but who knows, it is Aaron Rodgers, I think that the Pittsburgh Steelers are still more than comfortable trading for Kirk Cousins to be their starting quarterback this year. Kirk's been a franchise quarterback in this league for a very long time. He's coming off the second year off an Achilles injury instead of last year where he was 1 year removed from that Achilles tear. So hopefully the arm strength issues that we saw from him last year won't be as detrimental to his game if he comes to the Pittsburgh Steelers this year. I do think that the projected trade here for the Steelers when it comes to Kirk Cousins is I think they'd offer a conditional 6th-round pick that could turn into a 5th round, or that could turn into a 4th-round pick if Cousins plays 50% of the snaps. So the same exact deal that you had for Justin Fields last year, you offer that to the Atlanta Falcons in exchange for Kirk Cousins. Then when it comes to the remaining money on Cousins' deal, which is a very important part of this discussion, right now he's slated to make $27.5 million from the Steelers if he gets traded here. Then he's got $45 over the next 2 years if he's traded to Pittsburgh. Now, obviously, my guess here is that Atlanta would have to take on a pretty big chunk of that money if the Steelers are going to trade for Kirk Cousins. But hey, if Rodgers decides to retire, Atlanta might feel like, hey, we have a lot of leverage in this situation because there's really no other quarterback, starting quarterback options out there on the market, and the Steelers might be stuck paying quite a bit of this money left on Kirk Cousins' deal. So Rodgers not only do I think is the better quarterback compared to Kirk Cousins, but he's also the far more affordable option. So obviously, if things go ideally for the Pittsburgh Steelers at this point in time, Aaron Rodgers will be their starting quarterback week 1 next year. So pick your week 1 starting quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Type AR for Aaron Rodgers, type KC for Kirk Cousins, MR for Mason Rudolph, or if you want the 6th-round rookie Will Howard to start, type WH down there in the comments section for today's pinned question. YouTube's going to throw you an ad break here in just a couple of seconds, and when that happens, take advantage of that time. But letting me know which quarterback you want to be starting week 1. So now let's talk about nickel corner here because the Steelers do have Joey Porter Jr. and, of course, Darius Slay on the outside, and Corey Trice Jr. is a pretty decent backup in that regard on the outside. But when it comes to the nickel position, do you think Beanie Bishop Jr. is in pole position to start the offseason program because he did start games for this team at that position last year, had multiple interceptions, but his kind of smaller stature definitely was a liability in coverage at that position at times last year. They did draft Dante Kent, who spent a lot of time playing in the slot at Central Michigan. Sebastian Castro, who spent a lot of time in the nickel at Iowa. And then they brought in Brandon Eccles, who can also play in the slot. So those are going to be the nickel candidates, at least right now, if they don't sign anybody else to be the bona fide starting nickel for the Pittsburgh Steelers. It's going to be a four-way competition between these four gentlemen right here. So let's talk about some of the options that the Steelers have in free agency or in the trade market that could be bona fide starters here. Asante Samuel Jr. still available, might be a little bit more expensive than some of the other options out there, but he is somebody that's inside, outside, versatile, and could certainly be your full-time starting nickel if you asked him to. Mike Hilton, I would still love to get Mike Hilton. I would have loved to get Mike Hilton on the first day of NFL free agency. He's a phenomenal blitzer from the slot. If the Steelers bring him in, they can get him at an affordable price at this point. I would absolutely love for Hilton to return to the black and gold. Then Arthur Maulet, he goes to the Ravens and he kind of crap talks the Steelers. I'm not sure if he wants to come back here, but he is another kind of blitzing type of nickel corner that has a ton of experience in this defense. Somebody to consider here. But I think that the outside the box option here, guys, is to consider a trade for Dolphins cornerback Jaylen Ramsay. Now, I'm not sure how realistic this is, but I think it's an interesting possibility for the Pittsburgh Steelers here because Ramsey had his best seasons of his NFL career playing for the Los Angeles Rams, where they kind of had him play in a nickel star type of role where he played in the slot, and he really played awesome at that position, guys. I thought that, not only in terms of PFF grading, but in terms of how he looked on film, like his instincts, his ability to read the quarterback's eyes, his physicality was just such a perfect fit in the slot. So if the Steelers really want to go all in and get like the best nickel corner in football here, in my opinion, in Jaylen Ramsay, that is something that if you wanted to do this, I would be perfectly on board with adding a player like this to your defense. But the thing is, Miami probably won't trade him until after post-June 1st because of the dead cap situation that the Dolphins have to deal with. I did think that there was a possibility they could have traded Ramsey before or during the NFL draft because, getting a draft pick this year might be worth it for them to take on $29.2 million this year. But that's probably what it's going to be for the Miami Dolphins because they can make it $10.8 million dead cap, which is obviously about $20 million less for them this year with Jalen Ramsey if they let go of him post June 1st as opposed to June 1st. So, when it comes to the Dolphins situation, they don't really have any incentive to trade Jalen before June 1st. So if this does happen, it's going to happen a little bit later in the offseason. And then if the Steelers do acquire Jalen Ramsey here, this is how much they'd be on the hook for. That is if Miami doesn't take on any of his remaining money. This year, pretty affordable, less than $10 million the Steelers would be on the hook for. But then the next 3 seasons, it keeps going up, 18, 20, all the way down to $31.19 million in 2028. But you could look at this here and say, hey, if you get Jalen Ramsey, you get one of the best corners in football and arguably the best nickel corner in football locked onto your team for the next 4 years. All right. So that is something that, I was talking to our Dolphins host here at Chat Sports, Nick Roloff, and I said, how much would it cost for you to get Jalen Ramsey? And he said a conditional 5th round pick, where if he meets certain thresholds, it turns into a 4th round pick, which I think is perfectly fair, where I think that, especially if Ramsey continues to be a really high-end corner for the next 4 years for you. And if you're really trying to win a Super Bowl right now, I think that this is a move that you could potentially make to make this team better. I think that you have to remember here that Pittsburgh is slated to have 2 5th-round picks and 6th-round picks next year, as well as 2 4ths and 2 3rds. So they got a lot of draft picks to work with in 2026, guys. So they can afford to let one of these draft picks go in next year's draft class if it means getting a high-end corner like Jalen Ramsey. So would you accept this trade? Let me know down there in the comment section. Type A for accept or D for decline. Let me know what you guys think down there in the comments section. In just a second here, I'm going to tell you about our sponsor today at Fanatics. And while I'm talking about Fanatics, give me an A or a D down there in the comments. And with that, let's have a word from our sponsor today at Fanatics. And if you haven't gotten your DK Metcalf jersey yet and you want to get one, go to chatsports.com/DK. That link is in the comments and description of today's program. You click on that link and you make a purchase. Fanatics sends us part of the proceeds here at Steelers Talk to help us keep the lights on, help us pay rent, help us improve our graphics, help us upgrade our equipment, all the stuff that makes this channel go and, what makes our content free for you guys. We really do appreciate your guys' support. So if you want to help out the channel and get yourself a brand new DK Metcalf jersey, go to chatsports.com/DK and get your jersey today. So last up here, kind of the most boring topic, but, I do want to talk about it. Depth O-linemen, because the Steelers do have their starting group of offensive linemen pretty much set in stone at this point. All right, Broderick Jones hasn't had the opportunity to play left tackle. That's the position he was drafted to play, so they're going to give him that chance to prove himself this year. Sayamalu and Frazier are locked into left guard and center. They really still like Mason McCormick, who they drafted in the 4th round last year, had to make the transition to left guard to right guard, and I think that they, with James Daniels' injury, he got rushed into that position last year. They don't really feel like the struggles that he had last year are indicative of the type of player he's going to be moving forward. Then you got Troy Fautano at right tackle, and if he can stay healthy, I have no problems with him whatsoever. I think he's going to be a great player. Then, outside of that, you got like Spencer Anderson and Ryan McCullum and, Max Sharping. So you could certainly use some interior offensive line help. They like Calvin Anderson as their swing tackle. Here are the top interior offensive line targets for the Pittsburgh Steelers, in my opinion. John Feliciano, Brandon Sheriff, Shaq Mason, Will Hernandez, Cody Whitehair, and Dalton Reisner, all players that have had quite significant starting experience in the National Football League and might be willing to take on kind of a swing type of role along the interior of the offensive line. Now, my preferred option would be John Feliciano, and the reason for that is because, A, he's had a ton of experience in this style of offense, running a lot of outside zone with the San Francisco 49ers and Kyle Shanahan there in San Fran. The other thing is he's a great veteran, 33 years old. He's seen a lot of things. He's played in multiple Super Bowls. He's got good size at 6'4", 325 pounds. Now, the negative here is he is coming off a season-ending knee injury, but the last time that he had a full season there in 2023, he had a 79.8 PFF grade, which is not bad whatsoever. If the Steelers got that out of him, and say if there's an injury along the offensive line this year, Feliciano can play center, he can play guard, either left or right. He's played all 3 of the interior offensive line positions. So if you're looking for a swing guy at this position, I don't think he can do much better with the guys that are available on the market than John Feliciano. So who's your guy? Let me know down there in the comment section. Which non-quarterback would you like to see the Steelers bring in for the rest of the offseason? Or if you think that they're all good, they don't need to bring in anybody, let me know that down there in the comment section. Thank you guys so much for making it to the end of today's program. Really do appreciate all of your guys' support. I will see you guys next time, and until then, here we go, Steelers.